Hello, this is Peter Bell, and I'm here with Kiril Mugerman, CEO of GéoMégAResources. Hello, Kiril.
Hi, Peter. How's it going?
Very good. My pleasure to record a call with you here for the first time and to speak about GeoMégA. People who've been following me, may have heard of Kintavar and KTR. You're the CEO of that company. It's an exceptional company as well, and the history between those two companies, everything largely beyond me. But I like what I see in the future for each of them. Um, Specifically, the news release today from GeoMégA starts to hint at what is coming in the future. There's a quote that I just read to you briefly here, Kiril. It says, "We believe that rare earth magnets are the future of the rare earth industry, and developing the recycling of permanent magnets and permanent magnet residues is just as important as developing new mines." It's a very bold statement of vision. Good for you. Would you like to elaborate at all?
Absolutely. So look, if you look at rare earths, we know that by volume, neodymium and dysprosium, praseodymium, it's roughly 20 to 25% of the global rare earth market. But by value, it represents 70% plus, maybe even 75% of the entire rare earth sector. So that just goes to show that's the main driver. And we know that that driver is only getting stronger and stronger, and that is electric vehicles, and that is wind turbines, so renewable energy, any motors to become stronger and more efficient and smaller. It's all about rare earth magnets. And if you look at recent videos that we've been publishing as well, articles, companies that research electric vehicles and electric motors, just a good example, Tesla has a really good electric motor that not everybody understands yet, but it's smaller than their competition, and it's more efficient than their competition, and it's all because of the way they use those permanent magnets in those motors. So the motors are the drivers of the electrification, and to drive those motors, you need those magnets.
Well, and listening to you speak there, it occurs to me that people who are watching this space, electrification and all the opportunities created, uh, they may be watching opportunity in mines, new mines, mining, and they may miss some of the demand if some of these closed circuit and recycling solutions that you, for example, are pioneering here. It really offsets a lot of demand from primary production in mines.
I don't think it offsets that big a percentage, honestly. What it does,
Good.
it complements the demand, the supply. If I appreciate what you're saying in terms of pioneering, but we are not really pioneering. We are pioneering it outside of China, but China's been doing it for a very long time. We know that China recycles a lot of magnets which come offline. We know that China's been dismantling and refurbishing wind turbines. We know that China is a leader of both wind power and electric vehicles. But the thing is, China does not accept residues, does not accept magnets from outside of China. They don't. They have enough of theirs, and they don't want other companies to ship old magnets back into China. It's a very difficult process. So what we are trying to do is pioneer it outside of China. And in China, they do it using the existing solvent extraction facilities. We don't have those, or a limited amount of them, and we need to use other processes. So that's what we developed. But the beauty is our process, and just like solvent extraction, can process magnets and can process concentrate from a mine. So in the meantime, we'll be focusing on that supply, but in the future, we could process concentrates from our mine or from any other mine. And that's very important not to forget that today, to bring rare earths into production, you don't have to focus on finding a deposit. And we usually know you find a deposit, and it takes, around 10 years to at least to put a project into production, versus with what we have here, the raw material is already there.
Yep. Well, again, something that you just said there, very interesting to me. I had not heard it before. I try and repeat it for clarity. I think specifically, we think about how contentious trade is around critical materials. and to hear that China is not importing magnet waste residues, that would seem to suggest, yes, that these are not necessarily the swing supply at this point, or it's puzzling to me and noteworthy that China does not allow the import of waste residue magnets.
Yeah, as far as we know, it's been like this since 2012 that they closed the door, and it's very, very hard to bring it. It's possible, and but several companies have been explaining to us how difficult it became. So most companies avoid doing that. It's just not worth it. The costs and the process is just complicated.
And Kiril, I would point out that you have done the opposite, where you've gone export. So you've gone to China and found people who will export waste magnet residue.
We are working all over the world. We are talking to companies in China. We are talking to companies in Europe. Now we are with a U.S. company, and all over the world, those supplies are there, and we are trying to secure them. And the more material we look for, the more we find.
Well, and you sell some on your website already. Isn't that just, where did that come from?
Well, so exactly. So we announced a couple of months ago that we bought 200 kilograms, and as we process that as part of our scale up, obviously we don't throw it out, so we offer it.
Wonderful.
And companies and research centers reach out to us, and they ask to provide us some material for them to do research, which is exactly why we are doing this. So we are not selling it from a commercial point of view, but more from a research point of view. But at the same time, the more we process and the more tests we run and the more scale up we do, the more material we have to offer.
And another quote from the news release: first of several agreements, continuous supply from various sources and countries is available for its planned commercial plant. I'm not sure if I've got a direct quote there or not. Some wonderful stuff to hear about in your first contract here. A United States neodymium iron boron magnet manufacturer based in Texas, supplying up to 1,000 kilograms per month of feed material. Minimum 1 year, possible to double to 2,000 kilograms per annum. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Peter.
And I would point out as well, the team building that goes along with this is very noteworthy. This company is a 43101 issuer. Is that correct?
Correct. When it comes to anything dealing with our mining project, it's a 43101 issuer.
And will it remain so, or is there a potential, pivot and focus on this?
So
magnet?
Inord is the focus for Inord is all technology and processing, and GéoMégA is focusing on Montviel on our mining project. So the two companies are functioning a bit separately on that, but for GéoMégA, the reason GéoMégA is there for all this is because Inord is the key to developing Montviel and to develop any other rare earth project in North America. If you have the capacity to refine rare earths, you will be able to develop a mine. If you can't refine rare earths, you're always dependent on shipping everything to China. And that's why for GéoMégA it was very important to start developing the technology, which now ended up all within Inord.
And is Matthew Bordeaux, is he working for Inord as well?
Absolutely. So it's all sharing of resources. So he's going to be involved in GéoMégA and in Inord.
Wonderful. To the audience who may not be so familiar, a proper CFO in a junior mining company is a rare thing. You don't always need a lot of financial control when you don't really have much money and you're just spending money on exploration. You do, but when you're in production and dealing with ongoing continuous supply, and it's a much different scenario. So what kind of guidance can we expect regarding financials on this as well? Is this something that we should be we'll be watching the year end at least, I get, right?
Well, absolutely. So when you're starting to deal with suppliers and buying more equipment and selling oxide and buying residues, you start going into agreements and you start dealing with accounting, more complex accounting. So that's where you really have to start building the team, and we were lucky enough we had the opportunity to start developing that now instead of relying only, as you mentioned, on external contractors that just help a little bit with the juniors. But that's an important part of developing this and bringing it to the next stage.
Well, and I will be keen to see some models of what your balance sheet might look like going forward. I hope that some in the community of people watching these stocks online can try to throw some numbers out there about what, whenever you go from 0 to 1, going into production is always a big transition, very difficult, challenging operationally. So good to see you building out a team around you there, Kiril.
Absolutely, yeah. Over the next months and years, as the whole thing advances to bigger and bigger scales, more models will get built and developed around this, and the market obviously is waiting for all those numbers, and we'll release them once we are comfortable with the numbers, once they've been validated, once they can be relied on, let's say. Yeah, so
Yes.
this is all coming up.
And another quote from the news release to that effect exactly. It says, while Inord has not commercialized its proprietary ISR technology as yet, its management has begun identifying various locations for a potential plant and will provide updates as the search advances and an appropriate location is secured. So, Kiril, wonderful to hear mention of that. And again, we'll be watching for guidance on some numbers there. The size of the plant, I wondered.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, one thing for sure we know, it's not a very large footprint, and because it's we know more or less how things will look like and what they will be for a commercial plant. So we started looking for those opportunities. You don't want to miss anything, so you never know what's the right opportunity. And we started this search. It's been now a few months that we've been keeping an eye open and reaching out to different groups. Quebec has been famous for petrochemical plants and great port facilities. And obviously, if we are going to be bringing material from across the sea, that's everything that's going into consideration right now while we are looking for those right opportunities.
Wonderful, wonderful. And the logistical challenge and everything ahead is very exciting. I'd point out as well that the numbers that you have published over the last year or so, I believe, have shown an exponential increase in the scale of the process that you've been running.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we managed. If you look at it from going from 2014, our concentration has been increasing dramatically. We went from 0.003 grams of rare earths per liter to 0.06, which is nice jump. And then from 0.06, we went to 130 grams per liter. I mean, that's not a 10 times increase. It's much more. And we usually operate right now at 100 grams per liter. But if you look at volumes, we started from 30 ml to 50 milliliters, and then we went to 2,500 milliliters, and now we are at 20,000 milliliters, so 20 liters basically. And if everything goes fine over the next few months, next year, it's ideally something around the 200 liter. And 200 liter needs more space, and more space requires more feed, and more feed will produce us more oxides.
Well, and the balance sheet that has to go along with that for the company as well. With the word modular, is that a word that gets thrown around? I didn't notice that word in the news release.
No. Modular approach is something that we talked a lot about in the past. We focused on modular a lot when we were talking about our previous technology, electrophoresis. Modular can still be applied here but is not as much of a key. We will still use a few modules, but it doesn't have to be hundreds of modules as it was required with electrophoresis. And that's because we were able to increase the volume. We were able to increase the concentration significantly, so it's much easier. So you basically, instead of having many modules, you have a very efficient one module, but you will still have probably a few modules depending on the final size. But if you think about our press release, we are talking about 1.5 tons per day. What's 1.5 tons? It's a very high density material, and think of it as 1 cubic meter. Okay, 1 cubic meter of regular rock is approximately, let's say, 2 tons per cubic meter. Now, so 1 cubic meter will give you 2 tons, and I'm talking about 1.5 tons.
Yes.
But 1.5 tons at think of very high dense metal and rare earths. Density is much higher than 2. So if the density is 4 or 5, you need to process much less than 1 cubic meter. So you're starting to look at a very small plant, or not a very small plant, but a very small module that has to process the numbers that we are talking about right now, and they will be producing very high valuable oxides.
Well, this is 1,000 kilograms per month of feed material for extracting and refining rare earth oxides. So that's a ton of magnet residue.
Per month. Is it? Correct. But the plant that we are talking about as our future plan in the press release is 1.5 tons per day.
Yeah.
So just to make sure you see the difference. Right now we are securing 1 ton per month, but in the future we'll be processing, or we are targeting to process 1.5 tons per day.
The exponential curve continues. Do you have the personnel in the space? And I guess there's some mention of the plant size, but people as well. I guess that's a question.
That's all to be developed, and yes, there is some of the personnel is already there. More personnel will be added as the plant is getting closer and closer to production.
Yep. Thank you very much.
As we secure the location and as we secure all the required equipment.
And as someone who's just started following this story within the last 6 months or so really closely, the business strategy you've been pursuing of bootstrapping, kind of using these magnet waste residues as the best feedstock to develop the new tech, it's starting to make more sense to me. And especially with this, what you're demonstrating here, your business development opportunities are very, very bullish, right? Like you're talking about becoming a real company here that's a going concern. That's not the case for the typical exploration company, right? So wonderful
absolutely.
shift.
It started as a regular exploration company, and it migrated more and more towards that. And it's very simple because in the mine, your grade is 1-2% rare earths. When you take the feed that we are dealing with right now, it's 25 and higher % rare earths. So you have to process much less material.
Thank you for saying grade number 2. I hadn't noticed that in the news release, but I would assume it's out in prior release and information from the company.
Correct.
Wonderful. Anything else that you'd mention to whoever may be listening?
No, I think we are good, and it will be my pleasure to talk to you again after more future press releases that will be providing more information.
Kiril Mugerman, thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter.